Tonight on this Easter Sunday, we're going to take you to a place outside our world. It's not Mars or Venus, but it might as well be. It's a remote peninsula in northern Greece that millions believe to be the most sacred spot on Earth. It's called Mount Athos, and prayers have been offered here every day with no interruption for more than 1,000 years. It was set aside by ancient emperors to be the spiritual capital of Orthodox Christianity, and has probably changed less over the centuries than any other inhabited place on the planet. The monks come here from all over and do everything they can to keep what they call the world far away. Not surprisingly, journalists are not exactly welcome. For more than 2 years now, we've been corresponding, negotiating, and frankly pleading for an invitation, but ran into one monastic wall after another. Then, much to our surprise and delight, a few months ago, the monks said, "Okay, come see who we are." This Byzantine cross marks the border between Mount Athos and the 21st century. The monks come here, as they always have, for the beauty, the tranquility, and the isolation. But most of all, for this. Father Iakovos is one of the few Americans on the mountain. He's been here more than half his life.
You have to understand the words that we're saying in today's liturgy are the same words that Christ was saying, the same words that saints from the 1st century, the 2nd century, the 3rd century, the 4th century.
And nothing has changed in Orthodoxy since then. It's the only branch of Christianity that can make that claim. Father Eliseos is the abbot, the top man, at Simonos Petros, one of the 20 monasteries. It was Abbot Eliseos who invited us here, and never let us forget what a rare privilege it was.
It happened once, in 1981.
The last time you invited a television crew here was 1981.
Correct. We weren't going to invite you, but your persistence convinced us to open the door.
The door he opened revealed the wonder that is Simonos Petros, which fits like a crown on top of a rock 800 feet above the Aegean. It was built in the 14th century, and the monks will tell you it must be considered a miracle that it hasn't fallen into the sea. There are 20 monasteries on Mount Athos. Some look like medieval fortresses. Others are so large they resemble small cities. They rise from virgin forests and line the coast, shrouded in mist. There's nothing on this 130-square-mile peninsula other than monasteries and monks. Nothing. We expected Mount Athos to be a quiet place, but we couldn't have imagined how quiet until we were dropped off here. The silence is only broken by the occasional tapping on a chiseled piece of chestnut. It's a call to prayer, and it started being used here before there were bells.
Οι άνθρωποι που βρίσκονται εδώ έχουν ένα και μοναδικό σκοπό.
The monks here have one goal, and that is how to get closer to God.
Father Serapion wanted us to understand that there is no place on earth closer to heaven than Mount Athos.
Μόνο πάνω από 1,000 εκκλησίες κάθε μέρα κάνουν θεία λειτουργία.
Every day, 1,000 divine liturgies are celebrated on the peninsula.
Είναι μοναδικό.
It's unique in the world and in the Orthodox Church.
Exactly what makes it unique.
Ο απόλυτος τρόπος της ζωής των μοναχών.
It's the absolute way of life of the monks.
It's a Spartan way of life, but all the monks we talked to said they never want to leave, not even for a day. So they try to be self-sufficient. They grow their own fruits and vegetables, do their own tailoring, and when they get sick, there's an in-monastery doctor, Father Imolaos, who's not very busy because the monks are in excellent shape. There's remarkably little cancer, virtually no heart disease or Alzheimer's. They must be doing something right in addition to drinking wine at 9 in the morning. They eat 2 meals a day. There's what they call the first meal, which lasts 10 minutes, and the second meal, which lasts 10 minutes. There's no meat and no dinner table conversation. The only sound, a monk reading from sacred texts. We were surprised by how busy the monks are. When they're not praying, they're working. Father Theodosius, born a Lutheran in Germany, is a mechanical wizard who has given the monastery continuous electricity and occasional hot water.
Many Christians in the world, they are looking for the original church, for the ancient church.
Do you think this is the closest to the original church?
Yes. When you come to Orthodoxy, you will see it has everything you ever sought for.
Father Averkios takes care of the ancient footpaths here. He clears the trails. We went with him on what was, for us, an exhausting hike on the hills above the monastery. It wasn't tough for him, though. He says that after decades of roaming the world, this is his path.
I've been to many places.
Tell me where.
From Switzerland, of course, from Sweden, Finland, Spain, Portugal, Singapore, Australia, and Texas.
Texas. How did you like Texas?
I liked very much. I liked mostly the people.
Now, with all the traveling you've done, how did you end up here?
I was searching for a way of life. I can give all of myself to that. And I think the God of Jesus is above all the others, money, lifestyle, even family.
The family at Simonas Petras consists of 54 monks from 8 countries. Father Yakovos came here 25 years ago from Winthrop, Massachusetts. This is about as beautiful as it gets.
I think so.
He took us on a tour of the monastery. It'd be tough enough to build a monastery on top of a rock today, but how did they do it in the 13th century?
You know, that's something which even modern-day architects are amazed at. When the workers came and saw the site where St. Simon, the founder of our monastery, wanted to build, they looked at him and they said,
"You're crazy."
"Are you crazy?" Of course.
So being crazy was not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Now, back then, how did you get stuff up here?
We have mules.
It takes 15 minutes to walk through the monastery into the sunlight. Enough time to find out that Father Yakovos' journey to Mount Athos started at the age of 6, when his father showed him a picture.
It was just so impressive. And I turned around and I said to him, "Dad, you know, I don't think that I'm going to be able to believe that somebody lives in that building until I step on those balconies myself."
Destiny.
It is a little bit too.
From the age of 6.
Yes.
Father Yakovos doesn't follow what's going on in Winthrop or anywhere else today. There are no newspapers, no radio, no television on Mount Athos. There are a few telephones, and Father Yakovos got a call last year. His father was dying.
Prior to his death, he was asking if I would go so I could see him one last time.
Reasonable request.
From a father, I think so. My response was negative, though.
You didn't go?
I didn't go. I didn't go because of the fact that monastics do not go to funerals of their relatives or their friends. They remain here at the monastery.
When your father asked you to come see him one last time, and you said no, was there any feeling of, I'm letting my father down?
Not at all. I know that we're going to see each other in paradise one day.
The whole idea at Mount Athos is not only to isolate oneself from the outside world, but to let go of all memories of one's past life. The purpose of your being here, as I understand it, is prayer without distraction.
I'm not being distracted now.
Why are you laughing? First, tell me why you're laughing.
Why am I laughing? Because St. Paul says we're to pray unceasingly.
What's funny about that?
That's not what's funny about it. What's funny is how you think I can stop praying.
You're praying every minute of the day.
Even right now when we're talking.
Really?
Of course.
You don't see Father Yakovos praying while he's talking. But look at these other monks. Their lips never stop moving, not for a second. They just keep reciting the Jesus prayer day and night. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. It becomes like breathing. Some monks say they can pray when they sleep, and they get no more than 3 hours sleep a night. But Mount Athos gets more applicants than it can handle. It's harder to get into than Harvard. The man comes as a novice, he's free to leave if he doesn't like it, and the monks can tell him to leave if they don't like him. When a novice arrives here, can you tell whether he's going to make it or not? Can you tell whether he's going to qualify to be a monk?
Όχι παραπάνω από ελάχιστο χρόνο το καταλαβαίνουμε.
After a while, it becomes pretty obvious whether or not someone is cut out for it, which is why we have a trial period, which can last up to 3 years.
I bet you know a lot sooner than 3 years. Vevers.
Certainly.
Once he's accepted into the community, it's a lifetime commitment. And life never changes here. Never. Every day at 3 in the morning, a single bell rings, informing the brothers that it's time to stop praying on their own and start praying in church. On a typical day, and every day is a typical day, the services last 8 hours. The monks say it's an 8-hour conversation with God, a dress rehearsal for eternity. And remember, this doesn't only happen on Sundays, it happens every day, 365 days a year. A monk never gets a day off. This is the Divine Liturgy, the life of Christ celebrated by men whose only passion is to move closer to Christ every day. The depth of their devotion defies description. They didn't look like the same monks we had met in the gardens and the workshops. They were utterly transformed, with a concentration so profound they were immune from distraction. There were occasional flashes of ecstasy. This old monk could have risen out of a Rembrandt. There are no musical instruments in the church, just chanting. Chanting without end. Many of the voices, the basses in particular, could have made it at the Met. We didn't understand the words. We didn't really have to. This phrase we knew. Lord, have mercy. The most miraculous thing about Mount Athos, when we return. The most miraculous thing about Mount Athos may simply be the fact that it's still there. Over the centuries, it's been invaded by Crusaders, Ottomans, mercenaries, pirates, and Franks. The Nazis had their eyes on it too. The 2,000 monks attribute their survival, not surprisingly, to divine intervention. But they've also been pretty crafty. Some of the measures they've taken will surprise you. If you'd like to come for a visit, though, it can be arranged, but it's not easy. First, you'll need a visa issued by the monks. And unless you're an Orthodox pilgrim, it can take a while. Next, you'll fly to Athens and make your way to a scruffy little town in northern Greece where there's no airport and where the roads are dicey. Then you'll hop on a ferry, unless the trip has been canceled because of rough seas. That happens all the time. But on a calm day, it can be a very pleasant ride. The monks will tell you it takes years of prayer and soul-searching before they're ready to leave the world for Mount Athos. For the likes of us, though, it takes little more than an hour. It was the beginning of Lent when we took these pictures, and the ferry was packed with pilgrims from all over the Orthodox Christian world. Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, Romanians, Russians. It wasn't long before the first monasteries came into view, and we thought we were sailing to Byzantium, to a fantasy land of castles and palaces. We were headed for Pelley, one of the oldest and largest monasteries on Mount Athos. It had the feel of a medieval city. Holiness seemed to seep from the very stones, from the frescoes on the 10th century church, from the marble font for holy water. But then there was the monastery's secular-looking centerpiece. There's nothing remarkable about the clock tower at the Pelley Monastery, except for one thing. Check out the time. It's just about 8:30. Now, my watch reads 2:30. That's a 6-hour difference, and there's nothing wrong with their clock or with my watch. It's because the monks on Mount Athos keep Byzantine time. The day starts at sunset, not at midnight. The monks measured time this way during the days of the Byzantine Empire. That's the Christian empire that followed the fall of Rome, and that's the flag they still fly here. How long ago did the Byzantine Empire fall?
1453.
1453. That's a well-known fact.
Well, it wasn't to us, but to Father Serapion, 1453 is the day before yesterday. This peninsula is the only place in the world that still keeps Byzantine time.
Κρατάει αυτή την ορολογία.
It has maintained this time for some 550 years.
It was harvest time when we arrived, and dozens of monks were hard at work in the olive groves on the hills overlooking the monastery. That's where we ran into Father Nicandros from Melbourne, Australia.
This place looks like a summer resort, like a holiday resort, like a retreat, but it's not. It's an arena.
It's an arena?
Yes.
What do you mean
the
it's
unseen
an arena?
warfare.
Unseen warfare?
That's right.
What does that mean?
We fight against the angels of the dark side, you see, of the demon, of the devil, Satan.
The battle against Satan and the dark side is waged here every day. The spiritual leader at Pelley is Abbot Ephrem.
Here, the life of Christ is experienced in a genuine way, and this doesn't happen in many other places in the world. What I'm talking about is the art of salvation.
It just so happened that while we were there, the monks celebrated an elaborate 7-hour vigil, and the church was packed with pilgrims. It's held once a year to honor the archangels Gabriel and Michael. According to the Bible, Gabriel and Michael led the army of angels that expelled Satan from heaven. The church's relics are brought out every day, and pilgrims ask for the blessing of the saints. The most sacred relic on the entire peninsula is in this case, fabric said to be part of a garment worn by the Virgin Mary. The irony is that while the Mother of God is revered here, no other woman is permitted to even set foot on Mount Athos. It's been like that for 1,000 years. The reason, according to Orthodox doctrine, is that Christ gave the peninsula to his mother, and all other women have been excluded so as to fully honor the Virgin Mary. It's also been said that in the days before the ban, when women did come here, the monks became distracted and couldn't devote themselves entirely to prayer. They say it's been a lot easier since the last lady left. Keeping women out certainly wasn't much of a problem 300-400 years ago. Do you feel that's becoming problematic today?
Όχι, δεν γίνεται πιο
I don't think so, because the monastery itself and all the land around it is our property. And if we don't want women coming onto our property, we have every right to do that.
Mount Athos may be the last all-male bastion in the world, and Father Arsenio says it has to stay that way.
Στον χώρο αυτό,
Here, we are concerned solely with purity and our elevation to eternity.
αναβάθμιση.
If women are permitted, they'd bring their families and their children. This place would become a tourist attraction and no longer a place of silence.
If we wanted to experience profound silence, we're advised to go to Stavronikita. It's the smallest monastery on the Holy Mountain, but it has some of the most remarkable treasures. You stay in the silence just by walking in. There's no electricity here, so the icons and mosaics are illuminated only by shafts of sunlight and a few candles. St. Nicholas, the patron saint, John the Baptist, and the Virgin Mary. We were stunned by the magnificence of the art here, but then we ran into Father Maximus, a former professor at the Harvard Divinity School. He told us what we were seeing cannot be described as art.
They're devotional objects, and they're part of the living liturgical life of the church. So we don't have any art, and we're not a museum. I mean, to put it starkly.
Whatever you call it, it's priceless. That's why the monasteries have been invaded and plundered so many times over the centuries. The monks' most recent brush with history happened only 70 years ago. The Nazis were coming their way.
In the spring of 1941, the Germans invaded and occupied Greece.
They marched up the Acropolis, raised the swastika beside the Parthenon, and were about to invade. The monks asked for a meeting with Nazi officers who advised them to appeal to Hitler himself. And the monks wrote a letter to Hitler.
A letter was written, and in the letter, the monks identified themselves. They said, "This is who we are." And they asked Hitler to place the Holy Mountain under his personal protection.
What kind of response did you get?
Well, it seems that Hitler liked the idea and accepted the invitation to become the personal protector of the Holy Mountain.
Well, let me just get that straight. Hitler, the personal protector of the Holy Mountain.
That's right. That's right.
Hitler did send a team of German academics to Mount Athos. They took 1,800 pictures of the mountain's treasures, and it wasn't because they enjoyed photography. Hitler wanted the monastery's riches in Berlin.
The professors were sent as an advance team to catalog the treasures of the Holy Mountain so that a selection of things could be made to be removed.
Didn't happen, did it?
No, it didn't. Not a single thing was taken.
Father Maximus believes they have the Russians to thank for that by the time the Nazi scholars completed their work, Hitler was bogged down in Russia and wasn't thinking about icons. That Nazi period has been largely forgotten here. To the monks, it was just one more blip on the road, and a small one at that. Today, Vatopedi is the most popular destination on the mountain. It hosts 35,000 pilgrims a year and offers more than spiritual sustenance. The monks have their own fishing boats, and the catch is pretty good. The fish are served fresher than in any Greek restaurant. The refectory dates from the 12th century, and since the 12th century, the food here has been free. Vatopedi has been supported by rich benefactors, emperors, princes, kings, and today, partially by pilgrims with deep pockets who commission icons in the making. But the ancient treasures? Not a chance. They can't even see them. They're under lock and key. It's not a new security system, but it works. Normally, it takes more than one monk to unlock the door, because no one monk is allowed to have all 4 keys at the same time. It's sort of a medieval version of the nuclear launch control. You keep those keys in your pocket, Father?
Try not to.
Father Matthew from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, was given the abbot's blessing to let us into the inner sanctum. Once inside, there was still another hidden door.
Behind the curtain,
We walked into the world of Byzantium. It was hard to imagine that everything here was at least 600 years old, because the brilliance had not faded. There are almost 4,000 icons stored in this monastery alone.
Wow.
The highlight? A 14th century icon of Christ. Every monk will tell you the sole purpose of life on Mount Athos is to get closer to Christ every day. And they say total union with Christ is only possible when they leave this world.
Πρώτο πράγμα που κάνει ένας μοναχός είναι να αγαπήσει το θάνατο.
The first thing a monk does is embrace and love death,
Embrace and love death.
Γιατί ο θάνατος
because death is the ticket to the other life. Without a ticket, you can't travel.
Where do you get the ticket?
εδώ στη ζωή αυτή.
In this life, that's what we do each day. We prepare for death,
Για το ταξίδι μας προς τον ουρανό.
and we are joyful about our journey to heaven.
Father Matthew offered to take us to the transit point between this world and heaven. When a monk dies, he's buried until there's nothing left but bones. Then he's brought to where every monk who's ever lived here ends up, the ossuary.
Any idea how many skulls there are here?
thousands. I'm not sure how many thousands.
Any idea how far they go back?
The ones here would be to the 16th century.
When you look at the ossuary, what comes to mind?
Mostly I see that this is where I'm going to be. I always like to say these are my future roommates.
There was nowhere for us to go from there. So we headed back to the mainland. The monks invited us to come back any time. And if we do, or if our grandsons or great-grandsons do, after 10 days here, this much we believe. Mount Athos will not have changed at all.
With a grueling pandemic and gruesome political season, you'd be forgiven for giving up on the idea of miracles. But tonight, we will take you to a place that's known for them. The sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes in southern France is the site of 70 medical miracles recognized by the Catholic Church. The Marian Shrine is famous to the faithful, but less well known is the Lourdes Office of Medical Observations. That's where world-renowned doctors and researchers conduct decade-long investigations into the countless claims of cures reported over the years. They determine which cases can be medically explained and which cannot. It's those church officials might call a miracle. For the doctors, it's a lesson in the limits of medicine. For the devout, it's divine intervention. The small French town of Lourdes, tucked in the foothills of the Pyrenees Mountains, draws more than 3 million pilgrims every year, more than travel to Mecca or Jerusalem. And almost everyone you meet will tell you they've heard stories of miracles here. But we heard none more inspiring than that of Sister Bernadette Mouriot.
I really tried everything I could, but this is something that cannot be healed.
What was your prognosis?
Full, total paralysis. The prognosis was really dark.
Strolling with 83-year-old Sister Mouriot through the chapel grounds in Brel, France, we found it hard to believe that for half her life she suffered from cauda equina, a disorder of the nerves and lower spine.
You wore this all the time.
Her left foot, she said, was twisted and limp. To walk at all, she needed this back and leg brace, an implant to dull nerve pain, and massive doses of morphine. She told us she had exhausted all treatment options, so in 2008, her doctor convinced her to make a pilgrimage to Lourdes. Did you believe in miracles at the time?
I always believed in miracles, but not for me.
So why did you decide to go?
Well, I didn't go there for a miracle. I just went there to pray with others. Lourdes is a place where the smallest people, or the sickest, or the poorest, they come first.
The sickest, the poorest, the diseased and debilitated, bearing wounds visible and hidden, come from all over the world, seeking to be healed by the shrine's natural spring waters and the power of prayer.
And so I've asked for complete healing or a super long remission.
This was Kim Halpin's first pilgrimage. She found out last year she has incurable blood cancer and came all the way from Kansas to cleanse herself in the waters of Lourdes. Are you expecting to be healed?
Not necessarily. Ask for as much as I want, and maybe I will be blessed with part of it, which will be okay.
Halpin was aided by her son Sean. We couldn't help but notice there are as many volunteers as sick here. The Our Lady of Lourdes Hospitality North American volunteers helped Jamie Jensen travel from Minnesota for his 18th visit.
Even though the camera sees that I have a condition and a chair, when I'm here, I don't have a condition.
Jensen's condition is cerebral palsy. All those trips to Lourdes haven't given him the physical miracle he wanted, but maybe, he says, he got the miracle he needed.
I was very bitter, very angry with myself.
Did coming to Lourdes change your heart?
Very much.
Do you consider that a miracle?
I do, because there's a peace within myself.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray.
Stories of inner peace and acceptance don't meet the bar for the Office of Medical Observations, and with just 70 medical miracles recognized in 160 years, you'd have better odds playing the lotto. Yet thousands of faithful line up at the baths and at this grotto where the first miracle is said to have occurred. The sanctuary, with its 3 basilicas and 25 chapels, is laid out like a grand theater complex, its many stages offering dozens of pious performances throughout the day. The finale, a candle-lit procession every night. There would be none of this were it not for Saint Bernadette. According to Catholic lore, in 1858, a mysterious woman appeared in this grotto to Bernadette Soubirous, a 14-year-old peasant girl. Jean-Marc Mica, the Bishop of Lourdes, says the woman spoke with Soubirous several times over 5 months.
And once, the 25th of March, day of the Annunciation, she said, "I am the Immaculate Conception."
When word got out the Immaculate Conception, the Virgin Mary, had appeared in Lourdes, people flocked to this grotto and within days started making claims of miracle cures, the ability to walk, restored sight. Worried about fueling mass hysteria, the Church set up the Office of Medical Observations in 1883 to investigate the claims. Which brings us back to the other Bernadette in our story. 14 years ago, Sister Morley found herself in a wheelchair in a procession at Lourdes seeking the intervention of Saint Bernadette.
And I really had that feeling that the Lord was walking with us. And I heard him giving me these words, "I see your suffering and that of your sick brothers and sisters. Just give me everything."
You heard the voice of Jesus.
Yes, I heard this in a voice. I can't really tell you whose voice it was. It was like a spiritual experience.
She said she returned home rejuvenated spiritually, but physically she felt worse. After 3 days in excruciating pain, she told us she suddenly found the strength to walk to the chapel and pray.
Then I felt some kind of heat coming into my body. I felt relaxed, but I didn't really know what that was meaning. And in my room, I heard this inner voice again telling me, take all your braces off. I didn't think twice, and I started taking my foot brace off. And my foot, that used to be crooked, was straight, and I could actually put it on the ground without feeling any pain.
All of a sudden, your foot was straight.
Yes, like that, like the way it is just now. And so I kept going.
She says she took off the braces and stopped the morphine all at once. Did this make sense to you?
No, I knew it was impossible.
She came to my door with her doctor, and she said, last year I came to Lourdes on pilgrimage, and 3 days after I got back home, I was cured.
Dr. Alessandro De Franciscis hears stories like that all the time. As the president and residing physician at the Lourdes Office of Medical Observations, the former pediatrician's job is to determine whether there is more to those stories by applying 7 strict criteria established by the Church.
And we're looking for a diagnosis. And if that diagnosis is a diagnosis of a severe disease with a severe prognosis, and then we want to make sure that that person is a person that was cured in a way that one would say suddenly, in an instantaneous way, in a complete way, and in a way lasting in time. And my 7th criteria that has to match is there must be no possible explanation to that cure. Sister Bernadette Morio.
Here on the end. He showed us the archives, which hold thousands of recorded claims of cures.
This feels like it's almost 10 pounds.
10 pounds, I think.
Dr. De Franciscis, a practicing Catholic, told us what separates the more than 7,000 claims of cures from the 70 the Church calls miracles is an ungodly amount of medical documentation and patients like Sister Morio willing to put their lives under a microscope.
We sent her to 2 different neurologists. We sent her to different rheumatologists because of the different specific case of her disease. We asked to repeat twice all sorts of imagery, electrophysiology. We did all that we would do in medicine to be absolutely sure of her diagnosis, and it was.
But he wanted to confirm something else.
I was asked to meet with 2 psychiatrists in Paris. They wanted to know if I was lying, if I had already had any hallucinations, if I had levitated. I remember answering, "No, doctor, I never left the ground floor."
Satisfied, Dr. De Franciscis sent Sister Morio's case to a group of 33 doctors and professors called the International Medical Committee of Lourdes. Its job is to determine whether a cure is what they consider medically unexplained.
We're not trying to rule something in or rule something out, we're just trying to be objective.
You could call them the devil's advocates. Dr. Michael Moran, a surgical oncologist, Dr. Jacek Mostwin, a professor of urology at Johns Hopkins, and Dr. Kieran Moriarty, a renowned addiction specialist, scrutinized Sister Morio's case. Is there anything that could have caused her response?
No treatment would be that effective that quickly.
Does religion enter into your medical conversation?
We cannot separate ourselves as people who have been deeply immersed in the culture and the traditions of Lourdes and the Church. But make no mistake, we're just as technical as a forensic pathologist when it comes to looking at the technical details of the case.
After 8 years of investigation, the committee determined that Sister Morio's case was medically unexplained. So when you do a survey, the investigation of Sister Bernadette's or any of the other cures, this is done on a purely medical basis, something that could be peer-reviewed by other physicians outside.
Not could, that is.
They are peer-reviewed.
I have estimated, I can affirm with absolute certainty that the case of Sister Bernadette had been reviewed, read, expertised by at least 300 physicians. 300 physicians. And if tomorrow morning any of our viewers is a doctor, and one day he stops in southern France and comes to see me and wants to look into the file of Sister Bernadette, I'll be delighted to show him, because we have, everything is open and collegial and no secrets.
The secret is the mystery of it all, and on that, the Church gets the last word.
Amen.
In 2018, a decade after her cure, Sister Moreau's case was declared the 70th miracle of Lourdes.
Declaring a miracle is saying God did something. This is the miracle. And the doctors cannot go on that land, on that field.
When I told people I was coming here, I got a lot of people who told me, oh, come on, there's got to be some explanation that we just don't know. What do you say to the skeptics?
Come and see. Be open. Don't be narrow-minded. Be open to believe that the real world is wider than the visible one.
It's been said about Lourdes, for those who believe no explanation is necessary. For those who do not, no explanation is possible.
This Christmas season brings fresh hope with vaccines rolling out and a new year dawning. It's a time of faith and reminded us of Lalibela, a monument to rare devotion. 800 years ago, an Ethiopian king ordered a new capital for Christians. On the central plateau of Ethiopia stand 11 churches, each carved from a single gigantic block of stone. No bricks, no mortar, no concrete, no lumber, just rock, sculpted into architecture. As we first told you last Christmas, not much is known about who built them or how. But the faithful of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church say there's no mystery, really. The churches of Lalibela were built by angels. The northern highlands of Ethiopia rose 31 million years ago when fissures in the earth flooded the Horn of Africa with lava a mile deep. On hillsides, you can still see columns of lava frozen in time. Iron made the basalt red, and gases trapped inside made the stone light and pliable as air. Christians laid their mark on Ethiopia before the year 400. They found the ancient stone welcomed the bite of a chisel. The churches were carved around the year 1200 by people called the Zagwe. Their king, Lalibela, is said to have traveled the 1,600 miles to Jerusalem. Legend has it, when he returned and Jerusalem fell to the Islamic conquest, Lalibela ordered a new home for Christianity.
And he came back with an ambitious idea or vision of creating an African Jerusalem, a black Jerusalem here in the highlands of Ethiopia.
Fazil Georgis is an Ethiopian architect and historian who walked us through the Rock of Ages.
Well, there are 3 groups of churches, and each group is interconnected within itself.
We're sitting in St. Mary's Church.
Yes.
How was it built?
Well, it was built starting from outside. They formed the shape, and then they start digging, or let's say excavating downwards.
So they dug essentially a trench around the whole perimeter,
yes,
which left them with a giant cube of solid rock.
Exactly.
And then they carved their doors, and in they went?
In they went.
Chipping inside, largely in darkness, artists sculpted many rooms with no room for error. Archways, vaults, and columns imitate traditional construction, even though in solid rock there's no need to hold up the ceiling. The enduring mystery is why. Why did King Lalibela attempt the seemingly impossible when easier building techniques were known? As the story goes, he was helped by angels.
Yes.
Who worked on the project overnight.
I think I would rather take this as a symbolic thing. Because...
Do you not have any experience working with angels in architecture?
Well, I get inspiration from angels.
The site of the 11 churches covers about 62 acres. It's divided by a stream King Lalibela christened the River Jordan. The largest church covers around 8,000 square feet. Each is about 4 stories tall. But their most astounding dimension cannot be measured. It is the length to which they summon adoration.
This is considered to be a holy place. That coming here as a devout Christian is a very strong sign of their belief. Some people travel hundreds of kilometers to get here, on foot, and they have been doing it for several centuries.
The churches are open for worship year-round, but we were there Christmas Eve when nearly 200,000 pilgrims rose to heaven on a path descending into the earth. Many walked for days or weeks, fasting, robed in white. An ordeal that is rinsed from the disciples in the tradition of Jesus. Any Ethiopian over the age of 30 cannot forget the suffering of drought and war and 1 million people lost to starvation. And so, having known poverty in this life, they've invested their souls in the next. Tawalda Yigzao told us, "I believe God is here. I came with faith." Her neighbor, Gaitier Ababao, and his daughter told us they walked from their farms nearly 100 miles away, a journey of 3 days. God can hear your prayers anywhere. Why did you feel you had to be here? So that God can see our devotion, she said, and our dedication. We were very tired, he said. We were falling and getting back up throughout the journey, all to see the celebration here. And God will recognize our effort. The Christmas celebration Ethiopians call Gena compresses them shoulder to shoulder to fast and chant and praise all night till dawn brings Christmas Day. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to be among the earliest capitals of Christianity, thanks to a mysterious figure of the Hebrew Bible. The faithful believe that the Queen of Sheba left Ethiopia, went to Jerusalem, where she met King Solomon. From that meeting came a son. And when the son was an adult, he returned to Ethiopia with 12,000 Israelites and the Ark of the Covenant, containing the tablets with the Word of God, the 10 Commandments. And the Ark remains in Ethiopia, according to the priests of the Orthodox Church. We met Tage Saleh Mazgabu, the head priest of Lalibela, at the Church of St. George, which was last to be built and judged to be the masterpiece.
I met a woman on Christmas Day who had spent 3 days walking here. Who are these pilgrims?
These are believers, he told us, not just 3 days, even 3 months sometimes. When there was no air travel or buses, people used to travel from various parts of the country for months to come here and celebrate with us. The celebration beats to the rhythm of ancient instruments. The cabero, double-headed drum, and a rattle called the sistrum, whose sound was known in North Africa 3,000 years before Jesus.
On Christmas Eve, we watched you and your priests lead the chant all night long. What are you saying in that chant?
We tell the people that God became human and a human became God. Because of Christ, we went from being punished by God to being His children again. Christmas is the day that forgiveness was born. But while God forgives, time does not. After 8 centuries, the basalt basilicas are weary of wind and water.
What's absolutely clear is that something quite miraculous happened here.
Stephen Battle is an architect with the World Monuments Fund, who told us Lalibela's miracle is being undermined because the rock is not rock solid.
When you're building a conventional building, you go to a quarry and you'll have different grades of stone, and you try and select the best stone and leave the bad stuff behind. When you're carving a church out of the mountainside, you don't have that luxury. And so typically in any one of the churches here, you get good stone, and a lot of it is good stone, but then you also get actually bad stone and actually very bad stone, which is really very soft indeed. And over time, if you touch it, it actually crumbles.
And this is one of the most sacred parts of Lalibela.
We saw the good and the bad in the chamber where King Lalibela is laid to rest.
This is one of the best preserved sculptures I've seen at Lalibela.
Yes, this is particularly beautiful, and they're also painted.
Simon Warwick is a master stonemason, also with the World Monuments Fund, a U.S.-based charity that preserves some of humankind's great achievements.
Obviously, we worked on the roof first.
Warwick has repaired European cathedrals and Roman antiquities, but Lalibela is more complicated because of the sincere belief that angels worked this stone.
Simon, you can't actually cut this stone in order to fit a new piece in, because the stone you would be cutting is sacred.
Yeah, this was one of the first big issues that I came across. If we ever had to drill a hole to strengthen it, to put in a pin, we had to discuss it with the priests. They collected the dust. There was a whole procedure around touching the fabric of the church.
The priest collected the dust?
Yes, yes.
That was the issue when Warwick was asked to resurrect the cross in this window without disturbing the fragment that remained.
So this cross wasn't here?
Completely gone, yes. There was a very, very thin piece of stone remaining. And so I hollowed out the back of the cross shape that we were inserting so that it was fitting over the original stone, a bit like a dentist. And so we were able to conserve this tiny bit of stone, which is, I mean, stonemasonry terms, it's crazy. But you have to do that in this kind of situation.
There have been other crazy conservation ideas. A dozen years ago, 5 umbrellas were built to keep the heavens from pouring down.
The local people call them gas station roofs. And I think it's a pretty apt way of describing them. So you can imagine we have this extraordinary site with some of the most beautiful buildings in the world, with extraordinary, huge spiritual significance. And there's a bunch of gas station roofs that have been placed over the top of them. It's really not compatible, it's not appropriate.
Unholy to behold, the roofs became a lesson in the law of unintended consequences. The churches were too wet, now they're too dry.
For the first time in 900 years, they're not being rained on.
Exactly right. And so the stone is contracting much more than it has ever done before. And what happens is this creates little failures on a micro level, and the stone starts to crumble.
The roofs were meant to be temporary, and in a few years they must be recovered. Stephen Battle prays they'll be removed altogether and replaced by intensive maintenance. To that end, the World Monuments Fund is teaching conservation to dozens of Lalibela's priests and laymen in the hope that a host can protect the heavenly, perhaps for centuries to come.
How long can they last?
Well, another 900 years if they're looked after properly. Oh yes, we're beyond a shadow of a doubt, absolutely, if they're looked after correctly.
Even beyond another millennia, we're not likely to know with certainty the answer to why. Why attempt what must have seemed impossible? No answer was apparent until we chipped away at what we saw Christmas Day. In the Old Testament, Isaiah advises those who seek God to look to the rock from which you were cut and the quarry from which you were hewn. Whoever cut this rock, angels or man, understood that in the presence of a miracle, faith is never washed away.
We're about to visit a place few people have seen firsthand, the Vatican Library.
a vast collection of historic treasures beyond compare, founded over 5 centuries ago when Europe was coming out of the Dark Ages, a period of so-called humanism, when the Catholic Church was open to new ideas in philosophy, science, and the human spirit. It's the Pope's library, but it contains much more than just church documents. There are manuscripts going back nearly 2,000 years on music and math, warfare and exploration, even cookbooks and love letters. The library is closed to the public, a place for scholars only. But the Vatican agreed to let us in to see some of the priceless artifacts of our collective past. Welcome to the 15th century. In Rome, turn a corner and you bump into antiquity, a delicious mixed salad of present and past. We arrived at the Vatican to find a medieval costume parade in progress. What better way to begin a trek through history?
There's about 2 million printed books.
2 million printed books. And inside the library, the past surrounded us again, as we were shown the magnificent building and its riches.
This is the Urbino Bible.
For instance, this spectacular Bible commissioned in 1476 by the Duke of Urbino.
Who wanted to have a very fancy Bible.
Well, here you go.
And this is what he got.
Library curator Timothy Jans tells us the Bible took years to make by hand, letter by letter, picture by picture.
Decorated with real gold.
It's just one of the library's 80,000 handwritten manuscripts from the ages before the printing press. Add to that those 2 million or so printed books, Christian and pagan, sacred and profane, in virtually every language known to man. There are thousands of prints and drawings, windows on the past,
Questa è una moneta papale.
and a huge collection of ancient coins. This was the money of Palestine 2,000 years ago, including the kind of silver coins Judas was said to have been paid to betray Christ. Here is a map of the world drawn 50 years before Columbus. At its edge, the Towers of Paradise. And an immediate bestseller, Columbus's description of his voyage to the New World, published in 1493. In a certain way, the library is kind of the attic of Western civilization.
It's so true, and it's like many attics. You know, you put things up all the time, you keep on pushing over boxes to make space for more things.
Father Michael Collins is an Irish priest who's written extensively about the Vatican, where the library's shelves, if you put them end to end, would stretch for 31 miles. Is there any single person who really knows what the library holds?
Nobody knows exactly what's there, because it would be impossible for the human brain to understand, to remember the titles, who wrote it, when they were written.
It is quite a treasure of the humanity that you have here.
Monsignor Cesare Passini presides over the library. Its great hall, essentially unchanged over the centuries, is a picture gallery of antiquity. Saints, philosophers, and depictions of the great libraries of the pre-Christian world. Babylon, Athens, Alexandria, a shrine to learning and to books. There's one person who can actually take a book out of the library, correct?
Yes, the Pope can have every book in the library.
If St. Peter's Basilica represents the splendor of the church writ large, the library nearby is a testament to the monks and scribes who made magnificent miniatures in times past. Here, some devotional music commissioned by Pope Leo X, and the text of the Christmas Mass used at the altar by Alexander VI, both manuscripts 5 centuries old, written on parchment, treated animal skin.
You will often see the skin of sheep being used, sometimes goats.
Christopher Celenza, director of the American Academy in Rome, is a scholar who's often used the library. He says that writing on parchment was not only tedious, but expensive.
If a monastery wanted to produce a Bible that perhaps had 400 pages, it might cost you 400 sheep. It's an investment.
Beyond the academic work, did you ever just come here to hang out and flip through stuff and see what you might discover?
I think all of us have come here at one time or another with the hope of discovering something, having a general direction in which we're going, but not quite knowing where it will wind up.
You might find, as curator Adalbert Roth showed us, drawings of a German jousting tournament in 1481, or an old cookbook telling us that Roman foodies in the 4th century dined on chicken, veal, seafood, pancakes in milk, and whipped pear cake.
How to hack away at your enemy's wall.
Or from an 11th century treatise on the art of war, a Byzantine soldier brandishing a flamethrower, something the Greeks invented 1,500 years earlier. Or Henry VIII's love letters to Anne Boleyn.
The letters are certainly among the most bizarre and unusual letters you'd expect to find in the Pope's archives.
There are 17 of them, handwritten by the King of England to the woman he would make the second of his 6 wives, and later have beheaded.
There's the little heart.
Henry signs his name with a heart, like a smitten schoolboy. He tells of his fervence of love, his great loneliness without her, wishing myself, he says, in my sweetheart's arms, whose pretty duckies I trust shortly to kiss. Duckies being a term in Henry's day for, well, use your imagination. What is that doing in the Vatican Library?
We don't know how they ended up here in the Vatican. It may be that some spy, maybe one of my priestly predecessors, may have stolen these letters and brought them to Rome to present in the case if a trial was made for Henry's request for divorce.
But the Church refused to let Henry divorce Catherine of Aragon so he could marry Anne. He married her anyway, broke with Rome, and took control of the Church of England. The country was largely converted to the Protestant faith.
This is one of the moments in the 16th century that leads to the fracturing of Christianity and to much of the bloodshed and the wars that especially the later 16th century was known for.
As man explored the planet, a scientific revolution was also underway. By the mid-17th century, navigators had mapped much of the world in remarkable detail.
Rio de Janeiro, Cusco, Mexico City.
Galileo turned his eyes and his telescope on the heavens. Here, from 1612, are his drawings of sunspots. For his insistence that the sun is the center of the universe and the earth moves round it, the Church branded him a heretic.
The Pope at the time, Pope Urban VIII, who was a very good friend of Galileo, said to him, look, I agree with you, you're right, but I can't approve of this because I'm the Pope, and if I go against this, it looks as if I'm going against the Bible, and I'm going to shake to the foundation the belief of the world and the world's Christians, not just Catholics.
Just 380 years later, in 1992, Pope John Paul II apologized for the Galileo affair. His successor, Benedict XVI, has sought middle ground in the centuries-old skirmishes between the Church and science. In a recent sermon, he said, even the Big Bang theory of the creation of the universe is not in conflict with faith because God's mind was behind it.
This is the tricky part.
And backstage at the Pope's library, science is brought to bear on crumbling books as restoration workers deal with water damage, mold, and the ravages of time. It seems endless, this work.
Yes, obviously.
Angela Gaitan and the others go inch by inch, patching and strengthening ancient pages, scratching off paste put on by well-meaning restorers centuries ago. Paste that's turning acid, eating away at the page. Mario Tiburzi seldom reads what he's repairing. It's too distracting, especially if the writer happens to be Michelangelo.
When I work on the Michelangelo papers, it was the same that work on Mickey Mouse paper.
Mickey Mouse, huh? A difficult job may take months or even years, but consider the result.
1,000 years after us, I hope that they can read the same thing that we are reading now.
The library's most valued documents go back almost 2,000 years, nearly to the time of St. Peter, the first pope whose tomb lies beneath the basilica that bears his name.
Petru Episcopu.
His letters to the faithful make up 2 books of the New Testament, and here is a copy written in Greek on papyrus by one of Peter's disciples around the year 200, a mere century or so after his death.
In the beginning, it was the Word, and the Word was God.
And from the same period, the Gospel of Luke and part of the Gospel of John, also written on papyrus, venerated by early Christians in Egypt, preserved for centuries in a desert monastery.
The bread for today give us.
They contain the oldest known copy of the Lord's Prayer, so fragile we were only allowed to see replicas.
That great treasure of papyrus, I think, is the most important treasure of Christianity.
With our tour nearly over, it seemed as if the library's collection had come to life in the streets of the Eternal City. The centurions and crusaders, the centuries of faith and folly, time present and time past. Leaving the library, we thought, there's something almost magical to be immersed in this place, to breathe the air and touch the hand of history.